Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a stroll through a time period that's been seriously romanticized, until you actually have to live in it. Imagine waking up not in a cozy bed, but in a straw-stuffed sack that's suspiciously damp, itchy, and somehow both lumpy and flat. This is your first day in medieval times, and spoiler alert, you probably won't survive it. Between the bugs, the smell, and the overall vibe of "please don't let me catch the plague before noon," you're already off to a rocky start. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing how far this sleepy little time machine travels. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to near total darkness. The only light leaks in through gaps in the wooden shutters, if your hut even has those. The smell hits first, musty straw, old sweat, and a faint hint of wet animal fur. You're not alone in the room. Someone's snoring. Someone else is mumbling, in their sleep. And under your straw mattress, something squeaks. Probably a rat. Could be worse. It could be a neighbor. You try to sit up and instantly regret it. The straw pokes through the thin linen shift you slept in, scraping your back like nature's bed of nails. No memory foam here, just memory fleas. And yes, fleas are everywhere. People didn't just sleep with them, they often believed these insects were part of the natural order. One fringe theory from the era even claimed fleas were God's little reminders to stay humble, or scratchy. There's no pillow, of course, just a folded sack or a log, if you're lucky. If you're unlucky, it's someone else's arm and they're drooling on you. You grope around for your boots, except they're not boots. They're leather wrappings or wooden clogs if you've moved up in the world. You pull them on and feel the dried mud crack around your toes. There's no glass window, no curtain to pull. Just the morning sounds drifting in from the village. A rooster that clearly thinks dawn starts at 3:45 a.m., a cow protesting milking time, and someone yelling about a missing chicken. You rub your eyes and wonder if you can get coffee. You cannot. Coffee hasn't arrived in your corner of Europe yet. Instead, there's a strong possibility someone will hand you a cup of warm beer, or worse, small ale, a low alcohol, barley drink that tastes like regret. Your stomach grumbles. But before breakfast, hygiene. Or the medieval idea of hygiene, which mostly involved splashing cold water on your face and hoping for the best. If your family's lucky enough to own a basin, you'll all share it. Yes, the same water, no matter how many faces go in. And if you're wondering whether medieval people brushed their teeth, well, sometimes they chewed mint or used cloth and salt. Sometimes they just didn't. Historians still argue whether dental hygiene was a genuine priority or just an accidental side effect of eating tough bread. Now, let's talk about that tough bread. Breakfast isn't breakfast as you know it. It's more like edible survival, a thin, tasteless porridge made from grains you can't pronounce, and water you probably shouldn't drink. You get a chunk of bread so dense it could double as a building material. Butter, that's a luxury. Honey? Only if you've got bees and no fear of stings. You chew slowly, trying not to crack a tooth. You notice something crawling on your sleeve. A louse. Common, unwelcome, and nearly impossible to fully get rid of. Personal hygiene is rough. Bathing once a week is generous. Bathing twice a month? Nobel worthy. And don't get excited about soap. Most people used a lye-based mixture that burned your skin more than it cleaned it. Outside, someone's shouting again. There's no alarm clock, but the village crier is doing his thing. You hear news, weather, gossip, and ominous warnings all rolled into one raspy voice. Someone's goat got into someone else's garden again. And there's a rumor going around that a woman 3 villages over cured a headache by staring at the moon too long. Witchcraft. Possibly. As you gather your things for the day, which includes a stick, a belt pouch, and not much else, you realize something important. You're tired, still tired, because nobody really gets good sleep in the Middle Ages. Between the snoring, the bed bugs, the animal noises, and the total lack of temperature control, it's a miracle anyone wakes up functional. You certainly don't feel functional. And yet, you shuffle outside. The air smells like smoke and soil and something vaguely fermented. A neighbor greets you with a grunt. You grunt back. Welcome to medieval mornings, where the day hasn't truly begun until you've stepped in something questionable. And let's not forget the cosmic joke. Sunrise is the only beautiful thing you'll experience today. The rest? It's all very downhill. You shuffle across the uneven dirt floor, ducking under the low lintel of your cottage as you step into the grey morning. The chill bites instantly. Your breath fogs in the air, mixing with the smoky mist crawling from nearby chimneys. No central heating here. Just firewood if you have it. And you don't, because you used the last of it last night trying to dry your wet socks over a sputtering hearth. Your belly grumbles again, expectantly. But let's be clear, breakfast in the medieval world is less the most important meal of the day, and more a social experiment in endurance. You make your way toward the communal table, or if you're a poor labourer, maybe just a worn bench outside, where today's meal is waiting. Gruel. Again. It's a thin mixture of oats or barley boiled in water until it achieves the exact texture of disappointment. No sugar, no spice, no redeeming qualities. Occasionally someone sprinkles in bits of onion or cabbage for excitement, but that usually just ruins the surprise. And the bread, it's not fluffy. It's dense, coarse, and black with rye or bran, heavy enough to serve as a paperweight, if anyone had paper. You chew slowly, aware of every crunch, every chew, every small pebble left in the flour. There's no such thing as food-grade safety yet. You glance around. Your table mates range from grumbling adults to sticky children, to a tired-looking woman fanning flies away with a broken broom reed. Everyone eats in silence, save the occasional cough or sniffle. Disease is always in the background. Someone's got something, and today you just hope it isn't you. Someone across from you reaches for the communal salt jar. You flinch, not because of germs, nobody knows about those yet, but because salt is expensive. Really expensive. Worth its weight in silver in some towns. A person who drops it casually like that either owns a salt mine or has nothing to live for. You finish your meal, sort of, and set your bowl down. There's no running water to rinse it. If you're feeling fancy, you'll wipe it with a handful of grass or ash. If not, it just goes back on the shelf, waiting for the next victim. As the table clears, someone mutters a prayer, and just like that, it's time to start the day's work, which for the average medieval person began before sunrise and ended only when the sun dipped low again, your hands cracked, your legs aching, and your soul mildly detached. But before you trudge off to earn your pittance, a quick note about manners. Because even in an age where everyone stank and nobody washed their hands, etiquette mattered. Don't speak with your mouth full. Don't point with a knife. Don't touch someone else's bread unless you want a fight. And whatever you do, don't pass gas at the table. Not because it's impolite, because it might be considered a sign of demonic possession. Historians still argue whether that's an exaggeration or just good hygiene disguised as superstition. You step away from the meal and realize just how hungry you still are. The food may technically have entered your stomach, but it didn't really satisfy anything. No protein, no vitamins, no coffee, just barley and sadness. A few neighbors are chatting outside. One of them mentions the lord of the manor was seen riding through town the other day, his horse kicking up clods of earth, his cloak billowing like he's the star of a dramatic play. You nod politely, trying not to sound too interested. Gossip is social currency, but in the wrong hands, it's also treason. Another villager mentions a monk passing through who had seen a frozen body fall from the sky. Now, is this a fanciful tale of a meteorite, or just a dead bird mistaken for a divine omen? We'll never know. The line between myth and reality is porous in this era, and sometimes people prefer it that way. It adds mystery to otherwise monotonous lives, and then, out of nowhere, someone offers you something unusual for breakfast. A boiled egg, A true treasure. Protein, warmth, a hint of flavor. You're overjoyed until you crack it open and find it half-formed. Welcome to nature's Russian roulette. You eat it anyway. Your final sip is from a wooden cup of small ale. Yes, ale, at breakfast. Clean water is hard to come by, and boiling takes time. So instead, you drink a weak beer with low alcohol and questionable taste, brewed by your own mother or neighbor, or, if you're extra blessed, by nuns who've mastered fermentation. As you down the last gulp, you can't help but reflect on how much you already miss modern cereal, even the soggy kind, especially the soggy kind. Someone nearby groans, clutching their stomach. Bad fish, they mutter. You nod in sympathy while slowly backing away. Food poisoning isn't just common, it's practically expected. And if you think you'll get a doctor, think again. The local physician mostly hands out herbs and chants suspiciously Latin-sounding words. You stretch, preparing for the day ahead. Your body already feels sore, and you haven't even lifted anything yet. You remind yourself, no elevators, no brakes, no ergonomic chairs, just your own 2 hands, your aching back, and 14 more hours to go. And by the way, if you were hoping for coffee to kick in around now, too bad. You're just going to have to power through on carbs, prayers, and spite. You shuffle away from the communal table, still chewing the last bite of that dry, defiant bread. And it dawns on you. Your mouth feels like you just licked the floor of a barn. Which, incidentally, you might do later, if the village healer recommends it for your humours. Your next stop? A little medieval hygiene, of course. Now, keep your expectations low. Lower. There you go. You head outside with a tin basin tucked under your arm. Water is fetched from a communal well or a muddy stream half a mile away. Sometimes both. If you're lucky, someone already boiled it. If not, well, you'll get used to the taste of frog. You splash some of it onto your face. It's cold. Shockingly cold. Like mountain runoff level cold, which makes sense since it probably did run off a mountain, right into a trough shared by animals and toddlers. Your teeth chatter as you rub your face cleanish with a square of coarse wool. No towel, just the same cloth you use for everything else. Like everything, you eye the soap, or what passes for it. A foul-smelling lye cake made from wood ash and animal fat. It stings, and it smells like someone tried to make bacon out of anxiety. Still, it's better than nothing. And in medieval times, that phrase is basically a lifestyle. You do your best with what you've got. A bit of ash rubbed on the teeth, a few quick swipes with a stick if you're extra ambitious. The modern toothbrush hasn't been invented yet, and mint-flavored toothpaste is a fantasy right up there with a nice pair of shoes. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually cared about body odor, or if it simply blended into the background like smoke from the hearth. Some records mention perfumed cloths and herb-stuffed sachets worn under clothes, but those were luxuries of the wealthy. You're just hoping today is breezy enough to carry the smell away from your face. Let's talk about your clothing. You head back indoors to change, though change is generous. Most medieval folks owned maybe 2 sets of clothes, work clothes and slightly less filthy work clothes. Your outfit today includes a rough linen tunic that still smells like last week's soup, a belt, a coarsely woven cloak, and hose that itch like regret. No elastic here, just laces, hope, and constant adjusting. And underneath all that, well, probably nothing. Underwear is hotly debated among historians. Some say it existed in primitive form, others claim it was a luxury reserved for nobles. Either way, you're feeling the draft. You lace up your shoes, or wrap your feet in strips of leather if your shoes have worn through. Soles are thin, stones are sharp, walking is pain, but you have no choice. The road awaits. As you step outside, your nose immediately detects something: manure. There's no plumbing in your village. Waste goes into pits, ditches, or sometimes just outside. You avoid the puddle near your door, hoping it's rainwater. You know it's not. The streets are lined with buildings that seem to lean on one another. for support. Thatched roofs, timber frames, tiny windows made from animal horn or oiled linen. Doors left ajar, chickens darting out. You nod to a neighbor who's sweeping filth into the road, not from courtesy, mind you. It's just what people do. Out of sight, out of mind, into the communal ditch. You walk carefully, because even a small slip can mean a twisted ankle, and in a world without urgent care, a twisted ankle can be your villain origin story, or your ending. There's no Advil, no crutches, no just rest it. There's work to be done, and if you don't do it, someone else might take your place, permanently. You pass a baker's hut, the scent of fresh bread so glorious you stop mid-step. But don't get too excited. Bread is for paying customers, and you're working on credit. Life credit, as in, try not to die today, and maybe someone will give you crust tomorrow. Further down, you spot a group of women washing clothes by the river. Their hands are red, raw, and chapped. One of them is arguing loudly about a missing goat and her sister's demon-possessed husband. That kind of thing is normal here. Everyone's got a story. Most involve livestock, bad omens, or both. By now, the sun is rising fully, revealing the haze of smoke that never really clears. You take a deep breath, which is a mistake. The air is a blend of soot, sweat, and that ever-present barnyard bouquet. Someone offers you a chunk of cheese. You thank them politely and try not to look too eager. But the cheese is hard, so hard it could deflect arrows, and smells faintly like feet. Still, you eat it. Because hunger makes philosophers of us all, and you're starting to think this wheel of cheese might be sentient. You continue walking toward the fields, and your legs already ache from yesterday's labor. Everything is sore. You remind yourself there are no massages, no chiropractors, and no hot tubs in your future. Just dirt, and toil, and the faint hope that maybe, if you're good, someone will give you a second helping of beans tonight. Still, despite the pain and filth and freezing fingers, you catch a moment of peace. A bird sings overhead. A breeze flutters your sleeve. Someone laughs, really laughs, just ahead of you. You can't help but smile. Even here, even now, there's something strangely human about mornings, and then you step in cow dung. Welcome to Hygiene in the Middle Ages. You wipe your shoe on the nearest patch of grass. Though, wipe might be generous. It's more of a smear, really. Still, you try to walk it off. You've got a job to get to, and time waits for no medieval peasant. The path to work isn't lined with blooming trees or scenic views. It's a muddy, rutted mess, pockmarked with puddles, waste, and the occasional aggressive goose. You sidestep a cartwheel rut so deep it could be mistaken for a trench. Someone's ox plods by, dragging, a wagon filled with turnips, and a child who looks like he's chewing on a stick, possibly for lunch. You look down at your feet. Your shoes are already soaked, the cold seeping through your socks, or whatever counts as socks in this century, probably scraps of cloth or old sleeves tied around your calves. The squelching sound they make as you walk is both hilarious and tragic. Soon enough, you arrive at your destination. A field, a forge, or a workshop. If you're one of the many landless poor, you might spend the day doing backbreaking agricultural labor, like weeding barley with your hands or hauling bundles of wheat taller than yourself. There's no tractor, no wheelbarrow, just you, your aching back, and a wooden tool that hasn't changed in centuries. Or maybe you're lucky, or unlucky, enough to work in a medieval industry. Let's say you've landed in a tannery today. The good news, you're not out in the rain. The bad news, you're ankle deep in urine and pigeon droppings, softening animal hides. The smell alone could qualify as a war crime in modern times. One quirky tidbit, tanners use dog poop as a chemical agent. Yes, really. It's a dirty job, but it comes with job security, mostly because no one else wants it. And if you happen to work in construction, you'll be hauling stones without gloves, pulleys, or OSHA regulations. Just brute strength and vague prayers. The odds of developing a hernia before 30 are very high. But don't worry, there's no surgery for that, just a grim nod from the town healer and some lavender. You take a break, finally, hours in. Not because there's a schedule, just because your body physically can't go another minute without collapsing. You sit on a stump or a rock and eat your packed meal. More bread, maybe an apple if you're fortunate, and a few cold beans. You drink from a clay jug filled with water so murky it looks like soup. Then remember, it probably is soup. Vague soup. Mystery essence, if you will. Around you, others are eating too. No one speaks. You all just stare at the same spot in the dirt, like you've collectively seen things. Because you have. You've seen the inside of a medieval workday, and it's not something you talk about unless you want to cry into your rye. Once, you overheard a traveller mention that in far-off places like China or Baghdad, there are wonders like paper money and fireworks and hot baths. You're not even sure what a firework is, but you're positive that hot water sounds like sorcery. Historians still argue whether European peasants even knew just how far behind they were during this time. But it wouldn't have changed much. Knowing you're in last place doesn't magically hand you plumbing. Back on your feet, you return to the fields. If you're working in agriculture, you spend the afternoon threshing grain by hand, swinging a flail in a rhythm that quickly goes from hypnotic to hazardous. One wrong move, and the person next to you has a black eye, or a new personality. You pass a group of boys catching rats in the barn. One proudly holds up a tail and says his mother will boil it into stew if it's a lean week. You smile weakly and try not to imagine the taste. The sun is high now and your clothes cling with sweat, but you don't take them off. There's no relief from the heat, no fans, no shade structures, not even deodorant. Just sweat and the smell of everyone else's sweat. You fantasize about air conditioning, a word that hasn't even been invented yet, and would probably be burned as witchcraft if uttered aloud. Suddenly, there's a commotion near the edge of the field. Someone's collapsed. Heat stroke, maybe, or just exhaustion. The others look on with detached concern. Someone mutters a prayer, another offers a sip of warm ale, and a third shrugs. He'll be fine, they say, which in medieval terms means, hopefully he wakes up before nightfall. It's just another part of daily life. Bodies give out, accidents happen, and everyone keeps moving. The work doesn't stop. If it does, you don't eat. By the time the church bell rings for Vespers, your arms feel like lead, your feet are numb, and your knees no longer speak to you. But the day isn't over. Not yet. There are still tools to be cleaned, animals to check on, and wood to stack. You do all of it in a daze, like a character in a dream sequence that never ends. And as you finish wrapping a bundle of sticks with coarse rope, you feel a strange swell of pride. You survived the workday. You bent, hauled, lifted, scraped, and sweat through every miserable minute of it. And somehow, you're still standing. You stretch your back and immediately regret it. Welcome to employment in the Middle Ages. The sky begins to shift, just barely, from sun-drenched haze to the dim, dusty amber of late afternoon. The air thickens with the scent of churned earth and sweating livestock. You wipe your brow with your sleeve, which is so stiff with salt, it could probably walk off on its own at this point. Lunch is long behind you, but your stomach disagrees. It lets out an impressive rumble that might qualify as a local thunderstorm. Not that it matters. You won't eat again until sundown, and even then, expectations are low. The medieval culinary tradition favors function over flair. Think of it as minimalist cooking, if the theme were keep not dying. For now, you trudge along, back toward the village center, hoping to catch a breather before the next chore inevitably finds you. Because rest isn't something you schedule in this world. It's something that sneaks up on you like a stray chicken. As you pass the well, you overhear some familiar voices gossiping. Because of course, there's always gossip. In the Middle Ages, there's no television, no TikTok, and no espresso-fueled podcasts. The entertainment is live, local, and usually involves someone else's misfortune. "Did you hear about Marjorie's cow?" one woman hisses. 3 udders, they say it's cursed. Another nods gravely, as if she personally witnessed the third udder deliver a sermon in Latin. You nod in polite disinterest. This kind of thing is common. Anything remotely strange becomes folklore within 24 hours. A weird birthmark, sign of the devil, a left-handed child, sorcery, a man who can count past 20, definitely a wizard. Historians still argue whether this was genuine belief or just a fun way to entertain oneself in a time before board games. As the sun continues to slide downward, the town square fills with activity. The bell rings again, signaling not just the time, but the rhythm of life. In the absence of wristwatches or smartphones, the bell is your god. It tells you when to work, when to eat, when to pray, and when to consider your sins. If you're in a bigger town, it might also signal curfew or the opening of the public bath. But you're not in a big town. You're in please don't fall in the well country. You watch a barefoot child try to climb a wooden cart. He falls, cries, and runs off. No one panics. That's just how injuries go. Unless a bone is clearly poking out, you'll be fine. And even then, someone will just tie a stick to it and tell you to walk it off. There are no doctors in this village. There's a healer who knows herbs and a widow who owns a suspicious number of jars filled with frogs. Your next task arrives not with fanfare, but with a yell. Someone needs help fixing a fence on the edge of the pasture. You're too tired to refuse and too guilt-ridden to say no. So you follow the voice, and soon you're knee-deep in nettles, trying to drive a crooked nail into wood that feels older than your concept of hope. Your hands are blistered. The sun stabs at your neck. You take a break by chewing on a blade of grass, and for a moment, you imagine it's gum. It's not. It's slightly bitter and makes your tongue numb. You decide to keep chewing. Work ends with the sun, but not like flipping a switch, more like running out of candle. You slowly drag yourself home, head low, legs heavy, trying not to trip over anything. You pass a man on crutches who nods in recognition. You've never spoken to him. He lost a toe last winter to frostbite. Lucky it wasn't the whole foot, someone had said. There was general agreement. As you reach your door, a strange calm settles. Not because the day is over, but because you survived it without injury, insult, or inquisitorial inquiry. That's a solid medieval win. Back inside, the room is dim, lit only by a dying fire and a faint shaft of light slipping through the slats. You sit, or more accurately, collapse. Your body hums in protest, but there's a small sense of pride. You earned this exhaustion. You wore it like a badge. You're part of the fabric now, frayed, stained, but holding. Outside, the town quiets. Chickens roost. Cows shuffle. Someone starts humming a hymn in the distance, off-key and lovely. It sounds like an apology whispered to the evening. Dinner soon, sleep after. But first, a few more things to survive. The last traces of sunlight are fading fast, slipping like ink into the cracks of the wooden walls. Evening has come, and with it, dinner. Or, as it's better known in medieval times, round 2 of survival eating. The hearth sputters reluctantly back to life. You blow into the coals until they flicker like annoyed fireflies, then feed in a few precious twigs. Firewood is scarce and valuable. Entire laws exist against stealing it. You'd sooner confess to goat theft than be caught pinching someone's. The logs. Tonight's meal is bubbling quietly in a soot-blackened pot. A pottage, the medieval equivalent of whatever's in the kitchen stew. It's mostly cabbage, possibly some barley, maybe a lonely pea if you're lucky. There's no salt unless someone just got paid. Definitely no garlic. It's still considered a cure for vampires or bad tempers depending on the region. You ladle it out carefully into wooden bowls, watching the steam curl up into your already greasy hair. Everyone eats silently again. Not because of reverence or etiquette, but because chewing takes all available energy. The stew is thick, clinging to the spoon like cement with ambition. You imagine it sticking to the sides of your stomach like plaster in a stone wall. You glance around at your fellow diners. It's the same faces as this morning. only now they're smudged with dirt, soot, and a general air of, please let me sleep soon. A baby cries somewhere in the back. Someone spills ale. A dog licks it up. No one comments. As you chew your dinner porridge, someone mentions that the Lord of the Manor is collecting taxes again next week. That means fewer beans and more panic. Medieval taxation is a bit like a game of limbo. How low can you bend before your back breaks or your chickens are taken? You scrape your bowl clean with a crust of bread so hard it might count as a weapon. Your jaw clicks ominously, but you keep chewing. You can't afford to waste food. Even crumbs are precious. There's no trash can here. What isn't eaten is fed to the pig, and what the pig refuses to eat. That's the real mystery meat in next week's stew. By now, the fire has settled into a gentle crackle, casting flickering shadows on the timber, beams above. And here's where things get dicey. Nightfall in a medieval village isn't peaceful, it's tense. The darkness is real, heavy, and filled with things you don't name out loud. Spirits, thieves, neighbors with grudges. You don't exactly lock your doors, there are no locks, but you definitely bar them with something heavy. People begin retreating to their corners. The house is one large room. No privacy, no bedrooms, just corners and shared space. Some families share their home with goats or pigs to keep them from being stolen overnight. You don't argue. You just move the pig over and hope it doesn't snore louder than Uncle Thomas. You lie back down on your itchy straw mattress, which feels somehow more uncomfortable than it did this morning. The fleas have returned, of course, like old friends. They bite and crawl and remind you that nothing in this era is yours alone. Not your time, not your labor, and definitely not your skin. Through the wall, you hear muffled singing, a lullaby perhaps, or a drunken chant. Hard to tell. Both sound roughly the same when delivered through a wall made of woven sticks and mud. Wattle and daub construction, sturdy, if you don't mind living in what is essentially a reinforced sandwich. You shift, trying to find a non-pokey spot in your bedding. Your elbow lands on something squishy. You pray it's not alive. The smell coming from the nearby chamber pot is doing battle with the smell of the stew, and neither is winning. You hold your breath. The candles are out now, or the single tallow candle someone was saving for Sunday Mass. Instead, there's the fire and the sounds. A rooster confused about time, a cart creaking in the distance, a scream, but probably just someone stubbing a toe. Probably. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come easily. Your legs ache, your stomach growls again. And there's that weird pressure in your sinuses that makes you wonder if you're coming down with something. You hope not. In medieval times, getting sick is like rolling dice with death. The treatments range from bleed you until you faint to put a pigeon on it. You try not to think about it. Someone nearby coughs, a wet, rattling cough. You try really hard not to think about it. And then, just as you're drifting off, someone lets out the most aggressive snore you've ever heard. A sound so profound it feels like it should come with subtitles. You stare at the ceiling and contemplate whether it's worth moving to the barn. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Not sleep, just the temporary absence of consciousness. And that's good enough for now. But the night is long, and you're not out of the woods yet. Literally, because half this town is built into one. The night was short and full of noises, scratches, snores, sudden thuds, and you wake up with the kind of groggy panic usually reserved for fire drills. Except there's no drill, just dawn again, and the feeling that someone's been sleeping directly on your kidneys, which they probably have. In medieval homes, personal space is an idea as foreign as indoor plumbing. You sit up with a groan, brushing away a clump of straw clinging to your cheek like a rejected moustache. Your joints crack like overused hinges, and you realize that you didn't really sleep, you just paused suffering long enough to reset the day. Outside, the village is already stirring. Chickens argue in the yard. Somewhere, a donkey is experiencing what sounds like an existential crisis. You push the door open and step into the misty morning, your breath forming little clouds that vanish quickly, unlike the stench lingering around your socks. You're not going to the field this morning. Today, you're needed at the market. Sounds fun, right? A quaint village bazaar with smiling vendors and colourful wares. Not quite. The market is loud, chaotic, and smells like raw fish, old onions, and unwashed ambition. The cobbled square is packed with townsfolk, traders, pickpockets, and at least one chicken that refuses to obey the laws of physics. You squeeze through the crowd with a basket slung over your shoulder, trying not to inhale too deeply. There's shouting everywhere. Someone is selling eels. Someone else is preaching about repentance. And someone, probably both, is being robbed by a third party who's pretending to be blind. You dodge a cart piled high with turnips and duck under a clothesline stretched across two stalls. It's a sensory assault. Your job? Helping unload deliveries and yelling prices that no one pays. You're not paid either, just given a heel of bread and the satisfaction of surviving long enough to see lunch. Your first task is to carry a sack of grain. It's heavier than expected, and as you stumble, a vendor yells, "Watch it, you great ox." You nod apologetically, unsure whether that was an insult or a compliment. Probably both. You wipe your brow and take in the sheer absurdity around you. One man is selling roasted larks on a stick. Another is offering genuine dragon teeth, which look suspiciously like pebbles painted with ash. You spot a barber surgeon setting up his tools. Sharp knives, scissors, and a bowl for catching blood. Someone mutters, "Time for a good bleeding," and you feel faint just watching. Historians still argue whether the barber surgeons did more good than harm. On one hand, they cleaned wounds and removed teeth. On the other, they also did skull drills and enemas with boiling vinegar. You quietly vow to never complain about modern healthcare again. While unloading crates of dried fish, you overhear gossip that the Lord's steward was seen drinking imported French wine. A scandal worthy of at least 3 weeks of speculation. People love to hate the nobility here. They live in stone houses with fireplaces and glass windows. Glass. You've never touched glass, much less cleaned it. You hear it's as smooth as ice and breaks like the dreams of peasants. Eventually, your stomach reminds you it's nearly midday. You grab a chunk of cheese from a vendor you know. He winks and pretends to charge you. But you both know this barter system is as much about goodwill as it is about survival. The cheese is hard, again, still tastes like the underside of a boot, but your standards have plummeted. Back at the stall, an old woman tells you a story. She swears that last winter, a man in the next village sneezed 3 times during Mass and was accused of being possessed. "By a sneeze demon," she whispers. You nod gravely. Because that's how it works. You hear a lot of these stories. Part folklore, part coping mechanism, entirely bonkers. Superstition saturates the air. People toss salt over shoulders. They tie charms to their belts. A merchant displays a dead toad nailed to a board, claiming it wards off illness. And oddly, you feel comforted by this strange logic. It gives the chaos structure. By early afternoon, the market begins to thin. People drift off to pray, nap, or plot. You help pack up the stall, return a borrowed crate, and avoid a scuffle near the tavern. 2 men are arguing over whether the moon is a god or just a clever trick of light. You don't contribute. You just nod at both and back away slowly. Before you leave, someone pulls out a hurdy-gurdy and begins playing. The tune is slow, strange, and oddly hypnotic. A few people clap. A child dances, badly. You find yourself smiling, and then, just as you think maybe things aren't so bad, a pig runs through the square with someone's shirt in its mouth. You sigh. Time to go home. You follow the pig briefly, not because it's your responsibility, but because the sight is strangely mesmerizing. The shirt flaps like a battle flag as the pig squeals triumphantly through the muddy square, dodging half-hearted attempts to corral it. Eventually, someone throws a cabbage. It misses. The pig keeps going. You turn back toward home, your boots squelching with each step. The air has shifted again, cooler, with that musty scent that says rain is coming, even if no one has invented a forecast yet. The clouds above churn like bad porridge, and you pick up the pace, basket in hand, back aching from the weight of labor and low expectations. Just before you reach your hovel, you hear a familiar sound, the church bell tolling for the afternoon sermon. It's not optional. It's not even just encouraged. It's required. If you don't show up at the village church, people notice. And if people notice, they whisper. And if they whisper, you're only one chicken sacrifice away from being accused of heresy. So you detour toward the church, a squat, cold building made of stone, wood, and fear. Inside, the air is heavy with incense and secrets. You find a spot, near the back, wedged between a baker and a man who smells like wet moss. The priest begins in Latin, which you don't understand, but that's fine. You're not here for the theology. You're here because social survival is tied to religious obedience. The sermon rambles, as it always does. The gist: behave, obey, fear God, pay taxes, fear God again. Every few minutes, people cross themselves or mumble amen at strategic intervals. You copy them, not out of belief, but habit. This is a world where religion isn't just spiritual, it's political, cultural, and occasionally fatal. You remember hearing about a woman who once challenged a priest on the interpretation of a psalm. She was invited to spend time in the stocks, followed by a month of public penance, and then mysteriously vanished. Historians still debate whether she fled, was punished more harshly in secret, or simply ceased to exist because the village needed to forget her. As the sermon lumbers on, your mind drifts. You study the stained glass windows, mostly red and yellow, casting a moody glow across the pews. One pane depicts a knight stabbing a dragon that suspiciously resembles a lizard with wings. Another shows saints doing things you're pretty sure weren't humanly possible. Eventually, the priest wraps up with a dramatic flourish and a warning about the full moon next week. Something about it opening the gate of reckoning. You're not sure if that's real theology or just an excuse to explain weird cow behavior. After the service, you shuffle out with the others, blinking at the sudden daylight. A few people linger, whispering near the chapel door. You overhear a heated conversation about a woman who supposedly turned her neighbor's bread into mold by glaring at it. She's definitely a hedge witch, someone insists. You clutch, your basket tighter and walk faster. You've seen how quickly accusations turn into sentences around here. Back home, the hearth is cold again. You stoke the embers and drop in a few sticks, watching the flames leap and flicker. The warmth hits your face and feels like luxury. You sit close, too close, but you don't care. You haven't been warm all day. Dinner is a cold piece of yesterday's pottage and a crust of bread so stale it could be used as a building material. You eat in silence, listening to the village hum outside. Footsteps, faraway laughter, a dog barking at nothing. You think about your hands. They're rough now, with little cuts and bruises that you didn't notice forming. You look around your single-room home, dimly lit and smelling faintly of sweat, smoke, and whatever creature is sleeping behind the barrels. There's no privacy, but also no pretense. Everyone here knows everyone else's business. Intimacy by default. You try to imagine living in a world with locked doors, your own pillow, and a light switch. It feels like imagining flying. Someone knocks on your doorframe and enters without waiting. It's your neighbor, old Willem, holding a candle stub and a look of general disapproval. He talks your ear off about how the new village tax collector walks too loudly and probably made a deal with the devil. You nod politely. This is medieval small talk, equal parts complaint and paranoia. Eventually, he leaves, muttering about goats, and you're left in silence again. The candle flickers. Outside, the rain begins. Soft at first, then louder as it pounds on the thatch above. Water begins to leak through a hole in the roof you forgot about. You move your bedroll, sighing. You'll fix it tomorrow. Or not. What's a little dampness when everything else in life is already dripping with struggle? You settle in, feeling the weight of the day press into your bones. You think about how the world outside your village feels as distant as the moon. Maybe there's a city with warm baths, soft beds, and people who read books for fun. Maybe. But here, tonight, in your little patch of medieval mud and memory, you're just hoping for sleep and dry feet. You wake before dawn, again. Not because you want to, heavens no, but because someone outside is already arguing with a rooster and someone inside rolled onto your leg. Again, your back feels like you've slept on a pile of bricks, which you basically have, but with added straw and vermin. You stretch, your joints popping like kindling in the hearth, and take stock. You're still alive. Your roof only leaked a little, and you haven't been accused of witchcraft overnight. All things considered, you're having a pretty good medieval week. This morning, you're assigned to the communal oven. It's your turn to help fire it up, which means hauling wood, dodging hot embers, and trying not to incinerate your eyebrows. The oven is shared by the entire village, and because nobody owns a personal kitchen, unless they're nobility or the village priest, it's an institution of necessity. You arrive at the baking yard to find a few villagers already there, muttering greetings through yawns. The oven is a giant clay dome that looks like an overturned cauldron, soot-stained and radiating residual warmth. Smoke curls lazily into the air, and someone's already complaining about their dough being stolen last week. Another accuses a neighbor of using cursed yeast. You grab a bundle of kindling and begin feeding the oven, sparks flying up like fireflies with attitude. It's honest work, if a bit warm, and you relish the brief moment of heat. One of the women next to you is kneading dough with her elbows. She offers a conspiratorial wink and says, "Best way to keep men from stealing it." You don't ask questions. Your hands are blackened with soot, your clothes reek of smoke, and your eyes sting. Still, there's a kind of rhythm to it. Stoke, wait, rotate, repeat. And while the bread bakes, people talk. Not just gossip, but real news. The shepherd's wife is expecting again. The village constable was bitten by a goose, and a monk passed through last week claiming he saw a holy light in the woods that sang in Latin. Nobody knows what to make of it, but it beats talking about taxes. You sneak a peek inside the oven. A row of loaves is rising, unevenly of course, because medieval baking is more art than science. Some are burned on one side, others collapsed in the middle, but they smell amazing, like heaven if heaven were mostly yeast and desperation. Once the loaves are done, you help distribute them. It's mostly barter, loaves for labor, loaves for favors, loaves for, please don't tell anyone about that thing I said last week. You pocket one of the less charred loaves and head out. Breakfast finally. You bite into the bread as you walk, and for once, it's warm, crusty, chewy, a little sour, a rare medieval moment of joy. Then you break a tooth on a pebble someone forgot to sift out of the flour. You chew on the other side. Your next task takes you through the village center again, past the stocks, which, yes, are currently in use. A red-faced man sits with his arms and head locked in place, his expression equal, parts annoyed and resigned. A group of children is throwing bits of turnip at him, giggling. You ask a passerby what he did. He insulted the Reeves pig, she says with a shrug. Fair enough. Justice is fast here, and uneven. A stolen apple might get you whipped, while a noble who knocks down a child gets a warning. The law serves order, but rarely fairness. Historians still argue whether this was intentional oppression or just a side effect of chronic disorganization. You duck down an alley, more of a gap between thatched homes, and almost trip over a sleeping dog. Or maybe it's a goat. Hard to tell from the smell. You're on your way to deliver a message to the blacksmith, which gives you a moment to rest your arms and simply observe. The blacksmith's forge is alive with noise. Sparks fly as he hammers iron on the anvil, and the rhythm is oddly musical. Bang, hiss, clank. His apprentice is bellows deep in a furnace, face streaked with soot, hair standing up like he was struck by very localized lightning. You pass along. The message. A request for a new plough blade, and accept a nod in return. Conversation here is sparse and efficient. Everyone has work. No one has time for unnecessary words. On your walk back, you notice a crowd forming in front of the church. Again, not for a sermon, this is a public trial. A woman stands at the center, accused of watering down ale. The public is invested. This is both crime and entertainment. You linger just long enough to hear the verdict. 1 week in the stocks and a fine of 1 chicken. You make a mental note not to get involved in brewing. Rain begins to fall. Not a drizzle, but that all-at-once kind of rain that makes everything instantly soaked. You pull your cloak tight, which does absolutely nothing because it's already wet from yesterday. You trudge home, avoiding the puddles that may or may not be puddles. One of them ripples ominously. Back at the house, you duck inside, dripping. Someone has started a small fire, and the warmth is immediate, delicious. You sit close and hold. Out your arms, drying your sleeves with the slow satisfaction of a person who knows there will never be such a thing as dry clothes in your life again. You tear another piece off your bread loaf. It's soggy now, but still edible. Barely. You eat it anyway, because in the Middle Ages, you don't throw things away. You repurpose, reuse, or reboil until edible turns into survivable. You watch the fire flicker in silence. It's hypnotic, soothing even. Outside, the wind howls. Inside, for just a moment, things feel safe. And then a chicken walks through your front door like it owns the place. You and the chicken lock eyes. It stands defiantly in the doorway, soggy feathers puffed up like it's auditioning for a medieval opera. You could chase it out, but that's energy you don't have. And besides, chickens here are basically roommates, uninvited, underfoot, and mildly judgmental. You scoot aside, and the bird clucks once, then hops up onto a crate like it's settling in for dinner and a sermon. Fair enough. It's earned it. But you? You've got one last errand before dusk as the rain tapers off and the muddy world outside glistens under a dimming sky. You gather your courage and a semi-dry cloak and head out again. You've been asked to visit the local herbalist, which is less a pleasant garden stroll and more a cautious hike into someone's apothecary-themed fever dream. The herbalist lives just beyond the edge of the village in a crooked cottage that seems to lean away from visitors. Twigs, bones, and mysterious bundles hang from the rafters. It smells like rosemary, smoke, and maybe something dead. You knock. The door opens on its own. Inside, the air is thick with dried flowers and suspicion. Shelves groan under the weight of jars labelled in a mixture of Latin, guesswork, and chicken scratch. Some hold roots, others powders, and at least one contains what you are almost certain is an eyeball. Of what, you're not brave enough to ask. The herbalist is stirring a cauldron, naturally. She doesn't look up. She simply says, "You're here for the poultice." You nod, even though you're not entirely sure what a poultice is. You were sent to collect one for a neighbour's swollen ankle, or possibly their ego. Details were fuzzy. She hands you a warm cloth bundle that smells like moss, vinegar, and confidence. Tell him to rub it on the skin, not eat it this time. That, this time, carries a story you don't want to unpack. You thank her, drop 2 copper coins into a chipped dish, and leave quickly, resisting the urge to sprint. Because in medieval Europe, you never want to be seen leaving a healer's hut too quickly. People might get ideas, and ideas get you gossip, and gossip gets you stocks. The light outside is fading fast, washing the landscape in shades of wet parchment. You hurry back through the trees, jumping a puddle, and almost falling into a ditch, helpfully disguised as a grassy lane. Back in the village, someone has lit torches near the well. The orange glow makes the mud look oddly romantic, in the way only historical documentaries dare suggest. You pause for a moment, admiring the way the flame dances against the stone. Then you sneeze loudly, twice. A passing villager eyes you warily. Careful, he mutters. Sneezing's how the plague started. You want to clarify that's probably not true. But then again, historians still argue about everything, from whether rats or fleas were the real culprits to whether sneezing really did invite demons into the soul. You decide not to tempt fate or medieval logic. Home again. The chicken is gone, thankfully, replaced by a small puddle and an air of paltry regret. You wipe it with a rag, then hang your cloak near the hearth, where it will dry approximately by next summer. You settle in for the evening. There's a bit of dried fruit left, probably an old plum, but possibly a mistake. Either way, it's sweet, and that's a welcome rarity. Sweetness is a luxury in your world. Honey, if you can get it, is a treasure. Sugar? That's for kings and crusaders. You chew slowly, savoring the moment. You hear someone outside yelling about a missing boot, then laughter, then a cow. Just your average soundtrack to medieval evening life. You lie back on your bedding and feel the straw poke you in 12 new places. A dog whines outside. You consider inviting it in. Dogs, at least, don't spread rumors, but you know better. Fleas are bad enough without a second set of carriers. The fire is down to embers now. Shadows dance across the walls in strange, slow patterns. You let your mind wander. You think of what it means to survive here, to live a life filled with labor, superstition, hunger, and the occasional pocket of warmth. It's not noble, it's not glamorous, but it's real, raw, tangled in the grit of daily necessity. And yet, people here still laugh, still sing, still dream. Someone across the village begins playing a stringed instrument, badly. The tune is shaky, but earnest. You smile. Then a child starts crying. A pig squeals. A rooster crows prematurely. And you pull the scratchy blanket tighter, trying to will yourself to sleep before chaos claims the night. You close your eyes. Another day survived. Barely. You light your torch from the hearth flame, watching the fire catch with a hollow thwoomph. It flares briefly, then settles into that flickering orange sway that casts shadows larger than truth. The staff you grip is smooth from years of use, worn at the edges from hundreds of hands before yours. Tonight, it's your turn to keep the peace, or at least the appearance of it. You step outside into the chill. The rain has passed, leaving the ground slick and squelchy beneath your feet. The air is sharp with smoke, manure, and that faint, almost metallic smell of damp earth. The scent of a village pretending it's not on the brink of unraveling every day. You begin your patrol at the outer edge, where the last homes give way to farmland, and farmland gives way to darkness. You've walked this path before, but it always feels different at night, as if the shadows themselves are watching. You pass the mill. Its great wooden wheel stands still, silent in the gloom. A barn owl blinks from the roof, pale and eerie. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a fox screams, a horrible human-sounding noise that makes your skin crawl. You grip your torch tighter and keep walking. Most villagers are asleep by now. The streets are empty, save for the occasional flicker of candlelight behind closed shutters. This is the hour when peace and paranoia coexist, when someone might be sneaking out to visit a lover or sneak off to curse a rival's cow. Historians still argue whether most accusations of nighttime witchcraft were fueled by fear or boredom. In truth, it was probably just both, and maybe a little alcohol. You turn a corner and nearly step on a dead rat. You sigh. At least it's not. A sign. Last week, someone found a rat curled beside a bundle of dried lavender and claimed it was a plague omen. Half the town refused to walk near the baker's lane for 3 days. Further along, you reach the old well. It's covered at night with a heavy stone slab and ringed with a few crude carvings, protection symbols made by someone long gone. You pause, listening. Nothing but wind. Still, you tap the staff twice against the stone, not because you believe, in curses, but just in case they believe in you. The torch crackles softly. Sparks rise and vanish. You begin the loop past the small graveyard next. The wooden crosses lean at angles, some toppled completely, others adorned with scraps of ribbon or tokens left by grieving hands. There's no stone here, only memories and mulch. A dog howls in the distance. A second joins in. You keep walking. You think of those buried here, children who never reached adulthood, mothers lost to childbirth, old men claimed by winter. Death is never far in this world. You nod at a familiar name carved into a piece of split oak. Your aunt. Gone last spring. Fever took her in 3 days flat. The healer did her best. Leeches, crushed mint, a prayer shouted toward the ceiling. But it wasn't enough. Nothing is most days. At the southern edge of the village, a figure steps out of the shadows. You raise your torch, heart quickening. It's Tom the shepherd, cloak wrapped tight, eyes wide. Saw something, he mutters. In the trees. He points behind him. You squint. Nothing. He swears it was tall with glowing eyes. Probably just moonlight on a deer, but you nod anyway. That's part of the job. Be the calm when someone else is cracking. You offer to walk him back to the sheep pens, which he gratefully accepts. Along the way, he tells you about a dream he had. 3 moons, bleeding stars, his grandmother hovering above a field of wheat. You tell him it means good harvest. You have no idea. But it makes him smile. Back at the pen, he thanks you, and you finish your circuit alone. The torch is nearly out now. The fire has sunk to embers, the flames stuttering with each gust of wind. Your shadow stretches long ahead of you, then vanishes entirely as the light dies. You reach your home, just as the bell sounds midnight. You hang up your staff and place the torch stub near the hearth. Your hands shake a little, not from fear, but from fatigue. You've been awake for nearly 20 hours, and your bones are keeping count. You drop onto the straw mattress without even changing clothes. Someone's foot is already there. You nudge it aside. You pull the blanket up and curl inward, trying to shield yourself from the chill seeping in through the cracks. The world outside continues, snoring, whispering, shivering, but you finally let go. Eyes closed, head pounding, heart steady. You've made it through another day. Barely, but you did. You sleep for a few hours, maybe 4 at best. And then, because nature doesn't care about your exhaustion, you're up again before the sun has even thought about rising. The rooster crows. Of course. You consider cursing it, then remember, blasphemy can still get you fined or flogged. Your body aches in places that didn't even exist yesterday. Your shoulder feels like it was used as a cutting board. Your right knee makes a strange grinding sound. You sit up anyway, because that's what people do here. You endure. Today, you've been called to help with the harvest preparations. It's not quite reaping season yet, but the fields need clearing, the tools need sharpening, and the village needs organizing. Because if there's one thing medieval people fear more than famine, it's chaos. Or taxes. Actually, it's a tie. You grab a half loaf of yesterday's bread, now firm enough to use as a defensive weapon, and chew slowly as you walk. A few other villagers are already out, dragging tools, yanking weeds, muttering about rain. The morning. Fog clings to everything like an anxious ghost. Your job is to repair the scythes. You're not a blacksmith, but you've done this before. Filing the blades, oiling the hinges, binding the handles with twine, and silent hope. Each tool has its own personality, like a grumpy cousin who refuses to bend. You set to work in the shed behind the granary, surrounded by rust, sweat, and the low hum of purposeful work. While you sharpen, you listen. The older men talk about how things were worse during the famine of 27. One claims he ate tree bark for a week. Another swears he saw his uncle make stew from boiled leather shoes. Chewy, but filling, he says, dead serious. You nod, unsure whether to laugh or gag. Outside, someone is singing. A woman's voice, high and clear, cutting through the mist like a thread of light. You pause, not because it's beautiful, though it is, but because singing is rare. joy, is usually whispered. Grief, on the other hand, gets shouted. Eventually, the sun climbs high enough to dry your boots. You take a break to check the hedgerows, collecting berries. Blackberries mostly, though some are more seed than fruit. You pop one into your mouth. Tart, sweet, a tiny rebellion against blandness. Later, the village reeve makes his rounds. He's the local authority, not quite noble, not quite peasant, but dangerous in that way middle managers often are. He notes your work, grunts, then moves on. You've done well. You may even get an extra portion of grain this week. Maybe you help stack bundles of hay, the stalks scratching your arms and face. You tie them off with rough twine, ignoring the small cuts blooming across your palms. Gloves are a fantasy. Bleeding is just part of the job. At midday, you pause to eat. A communal pot bubbles over a smoky fire, a mash of lentils, turnips, and hope. It's hot, filling, and surprisingly decent. Someone passes around a bottle of ale. You sip. It tastes like yeast and ambition. Someone tells a joke about a monk, a duck, and a fishmonger. You laugh harder than it deserves because you need the release. Then, a hush. A stranger has arrived. Dusty cloak, unfamiliar accent, a sword on his belt. Everyone stiffens. Strangers are rare, and rarely welcome. Could be a trader, could be a spy, could be someone running from the plague or bringing it with him. The reeve steps forward, asks sharp questions. The stranger offers vague answers, says he's come from the east, looking for work. People nod slowly, but no one believes him. That's the way of things. Truth is a luxury. Suspicion is free. The man stays for supper, then sleeps in the barn. The reeve assigns a night watch, just in case. You return home, carrying a few bruises and a bundle of firewood. The door creaks open. Inside, someone's baking root vegetables. The smell is earthy and comforting. You sit near the hearth and pull off your boots. Your feet are pale, blistered, and shaped like regret. You wiggle your toes to prove they still function. Barely. Someone hands you a boiled parsnip. You eat it, gratefully. The warmth spreads through your chest like candlelight. Later, a neighbor stops by to trade news. He mentions hearing a rumor that a nearby village lost half its people to a fever. They say it came from bad water, he whispers, or maybe the wind. You nod solemnly. You've heard it before. The stories always change, but the fear remains. Outside, the moon rises, a perfect silver disk in a dark, endless sky. You stand in the doorway for a moment, staring up at it. It's the same moon people have stared at for millennia. The same moon above kings, beggars, saints, and swindlers. You breathe in the night air, cool, sharp, quiet. Then you close the door. Tomorrow will be another day, but tonight you rest. Sleep comes easier this time. Maybe it's the parsnip. Maybe it's the bone-deep exhaustion that's crept into every fiber of your being. Either way, your eyes shut before the fires even died, and for once, the sounds of the night, snoring, shuffling, the occasional rat stampede, fade into the background like a lullaby played on cracked violins. You wake to the smell of burning porridge. A neighbor's kid was left in charge of breakfast and promptly fell asleep with the spoon in the pot. The result, a sticky black layer at the bottom and the kind of smoke that hangs around like a bad decision. Still, food is food. You scrape the top half off, add a splash of ale, and pretend it's intentional. The day begins with a call for repairs. A section of the village wall has collapsed. Not a grand stone fortress, mind you, just a low fence of wood and mud meant to keep pigs in and anything mysterious out. But in medieval times, boundaries are sacred. Breaches, even small ones, invite chaos, or at least wandering livestock. You head out with a few others, tools slung over shoulders. Someone carries a mallet the size of a toddler. Another drags planks, salvaged from an old cart. It's a patch job, not a rebuild. but everyone treats it with the quiet seriousness of a church ritual. As you work, someone mentions a solar eclipse coming in 2 days. You freeze for a moment, hand still on the mallet. Eclipses are not science yet. They are warnings, omens, divine signals. Someone starts whispering that the last eclipse brought a fire to the grain stores and a plague of boils to a nearby monastery. You nod slowly, pretending not to care, but inside, you're very much planning to hide in a cellar when the moon goes funny. Repairs take most of the morning. You hammer, tie, brace, sweat. One of the younger boys accidentally whacks his thumb with a hammer and bites his lip instead of crying. You clap him on the back. That's the medieval version of first aid. At midday, a travelling bard arrives. Word spreads fast. Someone's here with a lute and stories. It's the Middle Ages answer to Netflix. You drop your tools and follow the crowd to the centre of the village where the bard sets up under the old yew tree, striking a dramatic pose despite being about 5 feet tall and wrapped in a cape made of stitched together mystery fabrics. He sings a tale of a knight who battled a talking wolf, then another about a queen who turned into a bird, and finally, a tragic romance between a farmer and a ghost. The villagers hang on every word, not because the stories are new, but because they're not. These stories are familiar, worn smooth like river stones, passed down from mouths older than the hills. You listen too, letting the words wash over you like a warm draft on a cold night. Afterward, the bard passes his hat. People drop in coins, berries, even a tiny carved comb. You give him the cracked egg you forgot about earlier. He nods with solemn gratitude, as if you'd offered gold. The afternoon is slow. You gather herbs for drying, rosemary, sage, maybe a bit of yarrow if the goats haven't trampled it. You tie them into bundles and hang them near the hearth. They make the whole cottage smell less like feet and more like intentional feet. Later, you help mend a neighbour's roof. The thatch is slipping again. Rain keeps finding ways in. You climb up carefully, balancing on beams that creak with every shift of your weight. Birds scatter as you work. One leaves behind a tiny feather. You tuck it into your pouch, unsure why, but feeling like it might mean something. The sky turns pink. The air cools. You wash your hands in the stream, letting the icy water numb your fingers and rinse the day's grit away. Across the way, a girl teaches her little brother how to skip stones. He throws one like a catapult, and it lands with a plop 3 feet in front of him. She claps anyway. You smile. That evening, a small feast. Someone's harvested carrots, another found mushrooms, and somehow a whole roast duck appears. Stolen, gifted, divine intervention. No one asks. You eat slowly, savouring the crispy skin and the sharp, gamey meat. It's the best thing you've tasted all year, possibly ever. A few people sing after the meal, not for performance, just because it feels good. The firelight flickers on tired, happy faces. You lean back on your elbows and stare up at the stars. So many stars, no lights to drown them, no glass to separate you from them, just sky, vast and old, and humming quietly. A thought comes to you, unbidden. What if this is the best it gets? No comfort, no choice, just this. Sunrise, labour, scraps of joy, shared breath in the dark. But before the thought turns bitter, someone hands you a piece of honeycomb. Sweet, sticky, perfect. And just like that, the moment becomes enough. You drift to sleep on a full stomach, warm feet, and the sound of a lullaby sung in a language no one remembers inventing. You awaken to soft light and silence, a rare combination. For a fleeting moment, you think maybe it's late and you've overslept. But no, the sun's barely risen, the village hasn't stirred, and your joints aren't screaming. Yet, you sit, up slowly, listening. A fire crackles faintly in the hearth. Someone is already boiling water for tea or porridge, or some other thin mixture of hope and leftovers. The smell is faintly sweet. You stretch, yawn, and let your thoughts wander. Today, is the first true rest day in weeks, a feast day, in honor of a minor saint no one fully remembers, but who apparently saved a chicken from drowning and healed a bishop's toothache. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you don't have to thresh, mend, haul, or shovel anything until the bell rings vespers. You take a real bath, well, a wooden bucket warmed over coals and filled with rosemary and curses. The water is barely warm and filled with bits of grass. Still, you sink into it like royalty. For 10 glorious minutes, you smell like something other than dirt and fatigue. Outside, the village is lively but slow. People wear their better tunics. Someone's dusted off an old tambourine. There's laughter in the air. Even the pigs seem less offended by life than usual. You help set up the trestle tables, long planks balanced on barrels, lined with linen that has seen better centuries. Someone arranges clay cups. Someone else spills ale and laughs instead of swearing. You sit with them. You share bread. Not just the usual heavy rye, but sweet bread, made with honey and eggs and actual flavor. It tastes like morning. Children run in circles. An old man plays a wooden flute. The air hums with something unnameable, something that feels suspiciously like joy. You lean back, watching the clouds drift lazily above, and think, this isn't so bad. And now, at last, as the day slows and the feast winds down, the sun begins its slow descent behind the low hills, casting long shadows across the thatched roofs and muddy paths. The sky fades from blue to gold to a soft lavender blush. The sounds of the village dim. Laughter becomes whispers. Footsteps soften. Even the animals seem to know the day is preparing to end. You sit near the fire, your hands resting in your lap. Your shoulders loose for the first time in what feels like forever. Someone hums an old tune in the distance. A dog snores at your feet. The scent of smoke and warm earth lingers like a familiar blanket. The flickering firelight plays across, the walls dancing like tired spirits at rest. The house creaks softly, beams settling into the silence. Outside, a single bell rings once, just once, marking the hour, not with urgency, but with a gentle reminder. You're still here. You shift under your rough blanket, the straw beneath you strangely comforting now. You've survived illness, labor, fear, and famine, without plumbing, without heat, without comfort. And yet, here you are, breathing, listening, warm, tired, whole. Your eyes begin to close, the voices fade, the fire dims, the night wraps around. You, soft and sure, and in that moment, brief, quiet, real, there's peace. Because even in a time without mercy, without modernity, without rest, you found a little of each. Now sleep, traveler. You've earned it.